We've already got the user interface. Time to breathe life into it. Let's deal with obtaining data from text fields. The moment the user clicks the login button, we get the data and check whether it is correct. If no data was entered, we display an error message using the validation mechanism. First, we need to attach our controls to the code. To do so, we have to provide the ID for the fields. There are several naming conventions. The naming convention I use is field name, field type as an abbreviation. Having the ID, we may go to the code and extract particular references to the views. Using the find view by ID method, we can obtain any ID. In the case of extracting the button ID, we're dealing with a view which we have to cast to a button. In most cases, views are remembered as class fields. To do this in Android Studio, we can use the shortcut Alt-Command-F, which uses the local variable to be transformed to a field. In Windows, it's the shortcut Alt-Control-F. We repeat the same for the remaining fields. In order to handle the click, we use the on-click listener set on the button. We can use the version which uses the implementation of the on-click listener via our activity. I pass this as an object of our activity to the on-click listener, which isn't there yet. That's why we get an automatic prompt to implement the listener in our activity. In our case, in the created onClick method, we want to extract the contents of the text fields. We'll store them as strings. Text fields have the getText method, which returns an editable. It's a special entity which allows us, for instance, to modify data in the given control. In our case, we're only interested in the text from the editable. That is why I call the toString method on it. Once we've already got both values, we can check whether they're filled in. For that purpose, we can use the isEmpty method contained in textutils. This method simultaneously checks whether the field is empty, meaning that it doesn't contain any characters, and whether the string is not a null. If we find that the text is empty, we'd like to inform the user about it. Text fields have the property setError. It's a method which allows setting an error message which informs that the value in the field is not correct. That is why in the username text field, we set setError. We have two versions of this method at our disposal. One gets the text itself, and the other one, the text and the icon to be displayed. In our case, we'll use the simpler version. When entering the message text, we're dealing with a hard-coded text. In Android, using such texts is not recommended, particularly if they are displayed in the user interface. For our purposes, we can take advantage of the fact that Android automatically allows cutting strings to strings XML by pressing Alt-Enter on the text. When moving the text to such a file, we must enter its name, which has to fulfill the Java-related requirements. We can use letters, digits, underscores, and dollar signs. The action of setting the error message is repeated for the password field. After generating a resource, the getString method is automatically inserted, which returns the text based on a resource. It's a method of access to strings from the Java code level. It's also good to create an isError flag to check if any of the conditions occur. If there is no error, we can start the relogging mode. Here I call a login method which doesn't exist yet, so I'll quickly generate it using Android Studio. With this method, we'll be able to display the message about a correct login using, for instance, the toast mechanism. This is a mechanism of displaying bubbles which inform the user about certain situations. It doesn't require being accepted by the user. It's displayed only for a while, so the user may even sometimes fail to notice it. In our case, toast will do just fine. In order to create a new toast, first of all, we need a context. Another parameter is the message to be displayed. The last parameter is the duration time. We do not express it in seconds or other units, we just have to choose one of the two values. These are length long or length short. These values are defined by the system and cannot be overwritten by the users. We have no control over them. We only get the information that the long value is longer than short. In order for the toast to appear, we just have to call the show method on it. Now, let's start our application. When we attempt to log in without entering data, we get 2 exclamation points. They mean that there is an error in this field. Clicking the exclamation point causes our message to be displayed. The exclamation point is a default icon which can be changed with the use of the method which assumes 2 parameters. The moment we start entering data, the exclamation point disappears. If we fill out both fields, we get a notification about a correct login. This way, we've created a simple validation mechanism which allows us to check whether the data will be correctly displayed. In our case, we use very simple conditions which only check whether the field is not empty. We can also use more advanced mechanisms. If we assume that the username must be an email address, we could use the regular expression mechanism to check whether the entered name fits the expression describing the email address. In the simplest case, we add another check. In Android, we have the class patterns at our disposal, which includes a set of very useful patterns as regular expressions. We can, for instance, check whether the entered data is an IP address, telephone, URL address, or an email address. We just need to call the matcher method on such an expression, pass it to our string, and call the matches method. It brings back the value true or false, which informs about whether it matches the given pattern or not. If it turns out that the expression doesn't match our data, again, we can display an error. We don't need an email address for our login, so we won't add such a condition. To simulate a correct login, we check whether the provided data matches the pattern we assumed. In the simplest case, we can hard-code the texts we want to check. We assume that our username and password must equal the test expression. After a correct login, apart from displaying the toast, we can move on to the new activity responsible for displaying our task list. This activity doesn't exist, and that's why in the next module, we'll deal with how to create and implement a transition between them.